What I will be exploring is an anthropological perspective of psychedelic usage and its significance on societies from ancient Mayans and Aztecs to current societies. However, a point that must be made is that most primary sources regarding psychedelic use in these primitive societies were written by the white man. Additionally, many of the depictions of the psychedelic experience are regarding visions or sensations when that is not the emphasis of the experience for many societies. Another point is that the focus of many researchers was on the chemical analysis and composition of these psychoactive substances rather than the experience at all. When someone has a different cultural attitude or come from a different society to the people and rituals that they are studying, these issues can occur. As the white man come from a monophasic culture, which really only acknowledge or believe, if you will, the experiences of someone in their normal waking conscious state, it makes it then hard for researchers to understand the significance of the psychedelic experiences of polyphasic cultures, which integrates the experiences from variable states of consciousness to constitute their worldview. This gives these researchers a Eurocentric view of psychedelic usage as meaningless experiences of intoxication rather than ritualistic and communal. Even research today is based off of these primary sources that strongly hold these biases and limitations. The image shown here is a depiction of Teonanacatl, a psychedelic used by the Aztecs. This depiction comes from the Florentine Codex, an ethnographic study into the Aztec people by the Spanish in the 16th century. This is another limitation as well. The Spanish have their own religion, which has an influence on the depiction of the demon placing its hand on this Aztec man's head, for example. Anyways, the mushroom depicted is the Teonanacatl, and the Aztec man is sitting on a ceremonial object, a ceremonial mat. It's eating the psychedelic and then forming this kind of divine connection, or depicts the function of psychedelics such as Teonanacatl to these Aztec people as a more divine form of communication. So it's not just intoxication. Before Richard Evans Schultz's discovery of Teonanacatl, roughly translated to flesh of the gods, in 1940, the exploration of psychedelic usage in primitive societies was caught in an evolutionist paradigm where rituals were seen as meaningless experiences of intoxication, as science was seen as the most superior thing at the time. Also at the time, it was a debate as to whether the Aztecs used Teonanacatl and whether that was a mushroom or not. Through Schultz's cultural relativism approach, where he investigated through an insider's perspective, he was able to find the rumored psychedelic that was indeed a mushroom. This was through fieldwork in Mexico with the Mazatec Indians. He discovered the mushroom, and also this cultural relativism approach allowed him to study the context of usage. The mushroom has a small amount of psilocybin and was used for magical and functional purposes, from giving advice, locating stolen items, to witchcraft. Although this shift in approach was important for later research, his paper still emphasized the individual experience and failed to recognize its ritual and communal deeper meanings. The image on the right is Richard Evans Schultz's drawing of the Aztec god of flowers, Xochipilli, although I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. You cannot see his facial expression very well here, but it is said that his facial expression is, or their facial expression is in a trance-like state, you could say that this statue or this depiction shows the god on a ceremonial mat, and you can see that he is decorated with many psychedelics. So you can see that it was the usage of psychedelics was engraved in their belief system. In the 1970s, Marlon Dobkin de Rios investigated the usage of psychoactive substances in South American societies and advocated for its application in Western societies surrounding drug consumption. She noted the biological, psychological, social interactional, and cultural significance in the ritual use of psychedelics, and this was a subtle but important step forward away from the Eurocentric view of psychedelics as meaningless experiences of intoxication. It could be argued that this underpinned the proceedings of the current research of psychedelic usage in clinical settings. Fast forward to Zeljko Jokic in 2008, who fully participated in the Yanomamo Shapori initiation ceremony, ingesting the psychoactive snuff yopo. Through this experience, he was able to understand the culturally significant states of consciousness and described it as an intersubjective entry into the Yanomami life world, placing an emphasis on the communal aspects of these rituals. It seems that, finally, the field is shaking off the Eurocentric and evolutionist biases of primary sources and furthering the field in the right direction. However, these are not completely shaken off, as you can see from the title of his book, The Living Ancestors. Ancestors suggesting they're a thing of the past and they're primitive, and that is just a Eurocentric view, a Western perspective on these societies, and so these biases still exist. So, although it's been interesting to explore the shift in perspectives and approaches throughout the years in the anthropological research surrounding psychedelic usage, I would also like to just evaluate and analyze the similarities between all of these South American societies that the research and the researchers' findings. So, an interesting thing to note is that in a lot of these societies, the shaman consumed the psychedelic, not the patient. So the shaman is the equivalent, almost like a priest. They're the mediator between the physical and spiritual worlds. So the shaman takes the psychedelics to embark on that spiritual journey. Whereas in the Western world, it's completely different. The patient, the clinical settings that are being explored now, the patient consumes the psychedelic, and then there is a professional who guides them through that experience. So it's basically the exact opposite. Another similarity that's also interesting is that psychedelics were used among many of these societies for the specific function of locating stolen property. Of course, there's the purpose of forming contact with supernatural beings, but also many societies and many of these experiences noted the feeling of assuming the perspective of different animals, whether that be a jaguar or a bird or anything like that. So that's very interesting. The anthropological perspective of psychedelic usage is important as it underpins the Eurocentric bias surrounding research that contributed to the outright banning of psychedelic substances rather than trying to understand their functions and purposes from these other societies. Currently, this bias is being recognized and the tides are turning back to see if psychedelics can be used in clinical settings, which will be explored later.